Hi, everyone. I'm Mandy Dwight, founder and CEO of Dwight & Company, also the host of ROS Goss. As you know, at Dwight & Company, we're really passionate about robotics, automation that, change people's lives. So we're over at the Perkins School for the Blind in the office of Tatum Robotics today with the founder and CEO, Samantha Johnson. So thank you so much for joining us today, Samantha.
Of course. Thanks for coming all the way over.
Yeah, no, well, it was an easy drive for us, which was really cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of parking here. It makes it easy.
Yes, I was excited to see that. I don't know how much you know about my career, but I've been in robotics for a while. And the reason I got into robotics is, I think there's a lot of good that can happen with robotics. And I think that robotics are really going to change people's lives for the better. And I'm really excited to be talking to you today because when I think about that mission that kind of kicked off my career, your company, comes to mind, first of all.
I appreciate that. That's so sweet. And I think it's really interesting because I didn't get into robotics in a similar way because I was particularly passionate about robotics. I saw this problem and became really passionate about solving that problem. And it ended up that robotics was the solution and ended up finding my passion for robotics through that. So it's a really interesting kind of synergy with how you got into robotics and what we do here too.
Tatum Robotics, I want to introduce you to them completely because you should be absolutely watching them for the accessibility solution that they're providing. So, Sam, in your words, who is Tatum Robotics?
Yeah, Tatum Robotics has meant so many things over the years, but right now what we're developing is a connection point to the world for the deafblind community. And at Tatum Robotics, we're developing an accessibility solution that you can think of like a computer for the deafblind community. So deafblind people communicate through tactile signing, and you'll get to see Jaimi communicate through tactile sign later. But she holds onto my hand while I sign with her. And that connection point with the person sitting next to her is their only way to communicate with a friend or to check the weather. And so what we wanted to do was just give them a way to access information independently. So we've built this beautiful team of deafblind folks, hearing people who are really passionate about advancing accessibility and have now made it to this point that our technology is out in the world and we can actually, see the smiles it's bringing, see the tears from some deafblind people. And it's been such a rewarding experience to be able to, captain the ship and see where we've gone.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. And so when did you found the company?
So the company was officially founded, I guess, probably at the end of 2021 legally.
Yes. With me one time. Yeah.
But I actually started the idea during my undergrad at Northeastern.
Oh, fantastic.
So I had taken an American Sign Language class, and despite being an engineering student, I was passionate about accessibility through my time in high school and some of the experiences I had. So I thought, we'll give it a try. And as part of that experience, I went out into the deaf community and met deafblind people. And I met one deafblind person named Elaine Ducharme. And I was chatting with her through tactile sign. And when we were leaving, I was like, well, how can we stay in touch? She goes, well, you have to catch me next time you see me.
Oh, wow.
Because we can't communicate if we're not like this together. And then shortly after, COVID happened. And I was reading articles about the deafblind experience, and deafblind people were crawling through buildings trying to get access to information. They had no idea what was going on. And so I reached out to Boston's Deafblind Contact Center that Jaimi's a part of and Elaine and said, what if we built something together? And so for my master's thesis, I started developing early prototypes. And when I was about to graduate, Elaine and Jaimi and a number of deafblind people are like, you have to keep going. You haven't helped us yet.
Oh, wow.
If you quit right now, we aren't going to get this technology. We need it. So I decided to spin out the company, and that's when we landed at Mass Robotics. Actually, we were at Mass Robotics for a number of years as we got started. And now we're here at the Perkins School as we kind of get into that next stage of really launching the product.
Oh, that's so fantastic. I love that, so you were an American Sign Language. Like, what was your study in Northeastern?
I was studying bioengineering.
Oh, wow.
Which actually isn't really connected to robotics or sign language. But we always make the joke here that we don't do it because it's easy. We do it because we thought it might be easy.
Yeah, that's the robotics mantra, isn't
Yes,
it?
100%. And when I started this as my thesis, I honestly sort of assumed I could use off-the-shelf hardware. That was my assumption.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't have to build an entire robotic hand because there is so many already out there. But it turns out that the robotic hand that we developed, it has 18 degrees of freedom in order to accomplish all the hand shapes needed. And it's made of all TPU or rubber materials, so it's really safe for deafblind people to use. You can't use linkages or metal appendages anyway. So it ended up having to be this process of learning robotics, learning sign. And I feel like if you told me, 5 years ago that I'd be doing this now, I'd be like, I would not be qualified for that. But it's been such a great experience coming to the confidence in myself and learning so much and building the team to help us get to where we are today.
Oh, that's so fantastic. And, so you talked about mass robotics and you were over there, you're part of the accelerator program, so what did that do for you to kind of help you guys get going?
Oh, it did everything for us. So I went to mass robotics directly after my time at Northeastern.
That's cool.
And at the time, as I mentioned, I didn't really view it yet as like a company.
Yeah.
It was like a project. But being around Joyce and Colleen and Tom,
Fantastic people.
they inspired me to make it bigger. And they saw in me maybe what I didn't at the time. And Joyce was like, you got to get your logo going. And I was like, a logo for my project? She's like, for your product.
So funny.
And it transitioned us from this product, from this class project to a product and to a company, and helped us have the resources to build our early prototypes. We brought so many deafblind people to their space to try it out. And honestly, we were so lucky to be part of the accelerator, and truly right after that accelerator, we launched our product. So it's been an exciting year.
Yeah. So you were talking earlier that there's a lot of your products out there right now, and that's a lot of growth from when you incorporated the company in 2021.
Yeah, it probably doesn't feel as quickly being in the day to day, but looking back, and that's something we really try to do as a team quite a bit, is because, being in the weeds of day-to-day, we are a really small team. We're all wearing a lot of hats. We all see all the fires, but to really see how far we've come. And so there are actually a number of deafblind people in Massachusetts and New York who have our product and are using it at their homes for things that they would use to access the computer. And it's been a process of, we're a social impact organization. So government shutdown has been hugely impactful. But now that we're past that, it's really exciting to see, even by the end of the year, we'll get another 4 robots out and really start strong in 2026 to really even spread further across the country. We just got an order from Oklahoma, from a deafblind person in Oklahoma. So I'll finally touch Oklahoma, and it's going to be really exciting as deafblind people can now communicate with each other too. It's great that deafblind people can, talk to me or order a pizza, but now their own community can grow so much as well.
That's so fantastic. Yeah, I love that this accidentally found you.
I think the same thing. I think all the time all the things had to go right for me to be in this space, but it's been so wonderful. I've met so many great people and have learned a lot of skills along the way too.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard. We were joking about it, but it's like really hard every day.
It is really hard. And I think that I feel very lucky because we are so social impact oriented that, Jaimi comes in a couple days a week and you're just so energized.
Yeah.
She makes a call and she's bubbling in her seat, so excited. And you can really see that the days are hard, but the impact you want to accomplish is really happening. And you can see how more hard work will just make that so much better.
Yeah. And it takes a pretty strong backbone to be a founder of a company. What advice would you give to founders?
Yeah, I think becoming a founder in this landscape that was so new to me, was really difficult in terms of building that confidence. But I think what I learned really is anyone can be a founder if you're passionate about what you're working on. And what I would say is, listen to people. What do people complain about? What are people really excited about, to make sure that people are passionate about it as well. But I think, and especially, being a young woman in the space, a lot of people are going to come in and try to give you advice, or at the early stage, actually, I think every single person who gave me advice was telling me to stop doing what I'm doing.
No.
They're like, this is not, you can't have a company helping the deafblind, that you can't do that. And I was like, posh, we can try.
Do you send them an email? Do you have them on a newsletter I would have just a newsletter for those people.
Yeah, it was honestly quite astounding. I would say probably the first, we're talking to investors, talking to people in the robotics landscape. They're like, just forget the deafblind thing and make a anthropomorphic robotic hand, and you can find applications for that. I'm like, the deafblind.
So a saturated space, you're telling me.
Right.
Oh, that's great.
But that's what I'm passionate about specifically. And I think because I knew so many deafblind people too that cared so much, that I didn't, you could keep that backbone and stay strong and really push forward with your vision. And I think that's been so helpful and I'm so glad we didn't change course. Because imagine if we didn't build the hand specifically for this deafblind application, it's not going to work for that.
No.
We've tested with hundreds of deafblind people to make sure that this is the product that they want. We're not just making a fancy robot hand. It's a practical piece of technology that's going to help them in their day to day.
I do find that really valuable the fact that you really have people on the team who are deafblind. So you can have that. You know, a lot of founders build this thing and say, "Oh, everyone's going to love it. Wait to see." And you actually have people here in the building that are giving you real-time feedback.
Yeah, and it's actually funny, Elaine, who was that first deafblind woman who I met, she's on our team too. So it's a fun full circle moment. A lot of people that were on in the early days, but we also make sure to get a lot of new perspectives too.
Yeah.
People that are older, people that are younger, people who became deafblind later in life, people who were born deafblind. Because, if you just tested with one person, their perspective is going to be their own perspective, not really wide range.
Later on in the podcast, we'll hear from Jaimi Lard, who is actually a part-time employee here at Tatum Robotics. When she talks, because I've met her before, she's very passionate about the product and how it's really, changed her life for the better, as is most of the people that are using your product. So what stories stick with you?
Oh, there's so many.
I know, I figured out.
One that what always comes top to mind is we were working with this deafblind woman, and she was young, maybe like 40, late 30s, 40s, and she was born hearing sighted and then had lost her vision and her hearing. And I don't know why, we were just like doing funny phrases, and I just did smelly cat, and she just lit up and she goes, "Oh my gosh, it reminds me of Friends."
Oh,
She knew exactly what the reference was. She goes, "This is the first time I feel like I'm included in entertainment in the world since I lost my hearing and vision." And it was just this one little phrase.
Yeah.
And it just kind of showed me that, we can develop all of these feature sets. And I think it really does help us kind of avoid feature creep in a way, because we're like, get something out.
Yeah.
Even something so small can have this impact. We could always add in features going forward. And just the other day, we actually went to meet with this deafblind man in Connecticut. He's from France. So he, instead of using tactile American Sign Language, he uses the French version. American Sign Language is only in America. There's 300 sign languages. And the only person he can communicate with is his wife in like the whole world.
Wow.
Well, in America, the only person he can communicate is his wife. And so we put some French letters on the robot, and we were starting to think, can he start this bigger guy, very stoic, he wasn't smiling. His eyes just immediately widened, and he just started to cry. He sat there and was crying, and he's like, "Show me more, 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 more." He was just so excited. And it's when we were all crying, of course, because, but it was so exciting to see that just immediately using the robot, like there was no training process. Within 2 minutes, he could see how this could potentially benefit him and see how his world could open up as a result.
Yeah, that was another reason why I really wanted to talk to you today, is like for awareness.
Yeah.
Because, we were talking, Katie and Forrest are over here too. We were talking about, when was the first time that we met a deafblind person or heard about this? And I think it's just not something that people realize.
100%. I think people are always shocked when I tell them there's 2 million deafblind people just here in the US, because they're just so isolated. You're not going to see a deafblind person at the grocery store with you. And right now, if you don't sign, you really can't interact with them in an effective, meaningful way directly. And so a lot of what we do is that awareness, and why we go to schools and we talk to students so that they think about deafblind people. And I love to chat with budding engineering students about the possibility of accessibility, so they think about these things when they're designing products. What small additions can you make to make this more accessible for a group with a disability? And it's fun. Everybody here on our team signs, and that's something that we try to make a really accessible space here for, the deafblind people on our team, but also people who are visiting as well.
Yeah, and that's where that passion comes in that you were talking about earlier. It's like, it's all about that.
And it's so much. I mean, for me, when I first started the company, I wasn't a skilled signer, so I did have to rely on interpreters. And the trust that I was able to gain from the deafblind folks we work with when I was able to communicate for myself was just out of this world. To be able to know that I care so much about this, that I've learned the language and I can now directly communicate with these people. I can understand, the nuances of what they're using, the specific word choice that you can't always access through an interpreter. So it's been really, I think, a great benefit to the company, but also to me as the founder, and pushing features forward to know really where the community stands and what they're passionate about. She says, "That says weather." The robot will now tell me what the day's weather is going to look like.
That's fantastic.
If I continue forward, the robot spelling Today, and Jaimi just clicked enter. So it's now finger spelling start. It's saying day 37, partly sunny. That's
Good.
nice to see.
Yeah, 37 I could do without.
And then it's adding night. Mostly clear. So the weather, I feel very included here with the weather because I can't hear people talking about what the temperature is going to be. I can't hear that. So for DeafBlind, we're able to use this to learn what the weather. It's really helpful for me to feel really included and feel really on par, very fair with other people, with hearing people.
What other types of information do you get from the Tatum device?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different apps. There is messaging. We can text back and forth for communication. And very excitingly, there's calling.
Wow.
I can make contact with my mom, for example. I called my mom recently. She was shocked. It was amazing to talk with her. And I could call with her daughter directly to have direct communication access. It was so wonderful for me. And it's just like having an interpreter to help me communicate. I use the robot, and that has been just the most wonderful technology. I love it so much. And that's why I want just more and more people to be included in more communication access for specifically calling. And there's other things, like sometimes I want to know about what's happening in the world. So it has news. It has political news or breaking news. And you can pick what other types of news you want, and it will tell you all about it, what's going on in the world. And that has been really great for me as well.
That's fantastic. And I know that you're part of the team here, Jaimi, at Tatum Robotics. When did you first meet Sam?
I remember a long, long time ago, the first time I'm a member of the DeafBlind Contact Center here in Boston. It's a DeafBlind community group, and we have monthly events. And the DBCC, they sent me some information about a event, and I wanted to join in. And it was meeting this new robot, and I wanted to know what was up with that. And this was back, I don't know, maybe 2020 timeframe, right around COVID. And this robot was very, very, very new. And so maybe a little awkward too. But I wanted to help. As soon as I met the robot, I knew that I could help make it better, and it's only gotten better and better. And now it's wonderful. We have such a great team here working together to improve the robot for deafblind communication.
That's fantastic. And what is the most important thing that you would want somebody to know about accessibility for the deafblind community?
That is a very good question. And what's most important for me is deafblind people. Some deafblind people can use different access for technology. So, for example, some people can see sign language, but deafblind people can't see. So what do? We need to be included. And so we need to have technology like this. And we need to keep building on technology, things like an arm to build on this, so that deafblind people can make calls the same as you can call your family. So we can call the doctor's office, have access to legal services, banks, all of these things are so important to be able to have an access. And it's been so wonderful to use these services, calling, using interpreting, to be included in the robot. I'm very passionate about this, and I expect it's only going to grow and grow because it is really so important for deafblind communication. Hearing people maybe use a phone in deafblind, we don't have that right now. So we tend to be stuck. And that's why I'm so passionate about using this robot and being on this team, because the robot is really such a wonderful technology for that.
And, I imagine that you're here to kind of shape the roadmap of where this product goes. So, what is your advice to Sam and the Tatum team about what types of features you'd love to add to this?
Communication and discussion about all different types of deafblind across the world, really. It's so important. And Tatum has done such a good job of meeting so many different deafblind people and understanding what their preferences would be for the robot, because everybody has different preferences. And so it's important that we prioritize that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Jaimi, thank you so much for being here today. So, everyone, this is Jaimi Lard, who's joined us, and I'm talking to the wrong camera, which sometimes I do that. So Jaimi Lard is here at the Perkins School for the Blind, working on the Tatum team. The Tatum Robotics, their office is actually here at the school, which is so fantastic for their mission. So thank you, Jaimi, for being here with us today and talking about your use of the robot.
It has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
We talked about how hard it is to, build a product, deploy a product, make sure it's not the Fabergé egg in the lab, make sure it goes. But you're also a woman founder, which is kind of, it's a minority
It is.
group.
It is. Yeah, it's when I was at Mass Robotics, very early on at Mass Robotics, this was probably, I don't know, 2022, early 2022, they used to have these like female lunches, these women lunches. And it was just me, Joyce, Colleen, and the admin person.
But that's fun. I love those people. But yes, but it would be fun to have more people at the table.
Right. But it was so wonderful being there for many years. By the time we ended up moving out of Mass Robotics, the table was full. They had to stop having the lunches because there was no room at the table. And so it's exciting to see more women come into the space in whatever capacity, engineering, marketing, or, founders themselves. And I think as a female founder, as a very young female founder, when I started the company, I was 22 years old. And I think you have to really be confident in yourself and not let people get you down. I remember going to a networking event and I was there chatting with somebody, and he asked if my dad was coming to the event.
Oh.
I said, what? Like this small.
Did you say, is your dad coming to the event?
That's exactly what I said. I said, are we bringing our fathers? But, people, they don't always assume that you're in the room for the right reason.
Yeah.
And I think you have to make sure that that there is a reason you're in that room. And I'm now a mentor to specifically women who are looking to start companies or students. And because I think a lot of it is you need to have that confidence, because it's going to be hard for a myriad of reasons. But one of them is because maybe people aren't going to look at you the way they'll look at somebody who is a male founder or, who's been in the space for a long time. So it's been a really good experience. And I love that I can now walk into a room and feel confident going to that room, and also hopefully be a supportive to maybe people who don't feel so confident in the room, that we can always be a familiar face.
Yeah. One of the things I was going to ask you is, what advice would you give to a female founder that's getting started? Would it be confident, or what else?
Yeah, obviously that's easier said than done.
I know.
But I think something that was really critical for me to have learned is, if you're doing something new, novel, nobody's the expert.
No.
And I think for me, when I was starting this, I was like, oh, somebody else probably would do it better. Maybe if this person who was a founder, maybe they could do a better job. But who is going to learn sign language, understand the deafblind community, know about robotics, and if you're doing something new, there isn't somebody better than you to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that was a really good piece for me to realize that, you know what, yeah, I can do this, and I'm going to do just as good a job. I could even potentially do better. And there's not like a missing piece that I don't have. You can learn anything along the way. And this might be silly, but I learned always wear a fun shoe, because then it's really easy to talk to other women in the room.
Yeah.
Because they'll always come and compliment your shoes.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Because I think especially when you first start, finding another woman in the room is a really easy way to kind of enter the room and feel safe in that space.
That's a good piece of advice. And in
Thank
fact,
you.
we're, the DeWico team, we're going to a networking event next week in Atlanta. So that's a good, um, good rule of thumb.
Yeah, I don't have my I usually have these orange heels, and
Well,
it works
actually, I
every
think
time.
you and I might have almost the same shoes on. So I'm going to go with their fun.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, one thing too that I wanted to ask you about is, mass robotics, you said you started, there were 4 women at the luncheon, and now there's a ton of women. What has changed to bring more women literally to the table?
Yeah, well, I think people are prioritizing hiring women. I think that's I actually talked with many founders at Mass Robotics who don't have any women on their team, and I go, "Why don't you have any women on your team?" And they're like, "They don't apply." I'm like, "'Cause you have a team of 20 men. What woman wants to enter that room?"
Yeah.
So I do think people are prioritizing getting women in early, understanding that there's a benefit to having different perspectives on your team and, to make it a more inclusive space, also to help you going forward. And I think it's beneficial that there are more female founders who, without question, understand the merit of having a more inclusive team. And, we have co-ops here on our team, and it's great to see more students applying. I think there's more women in that field of engineering who are entering the space. And so I think it's really exciting that, this trajectory, I think, is only going to improve for women entering the space.
I think so too. I mean, I've been at this for, I'm not going to say how long, but it's like there were no women.
Yeah.
And I would go into a room and somebody would be like, "Oh, you're the only woman here." And I'd be like, "Oh, I didn't notice." Thank you. But honestly, I really kind of almost didn't notice a lot of times.
Yes.
Because I was there for what I cared about and what I was passionate about, and nobody was going to get in the way of that.
Right. And I think it's so important as a woman in the space to, understand that potentially you are going to be the only woman in the room and you don't need to change yourself because of that.
Yeah.
You can wear your fun shoes, you can be yourself. You don't need to change your personality to feel like you fit into that space. And I think that's hard, again, easier said than done.
It's hard.
But I think the more you do it, the more you realize. And something that I tried to do with my team is I'm probably not the same as, a male CEO or a male founder, but I make it work for me and my team, and I'm flexible in that way. And I think it's been a really fun journey to figure out my leadership style and who I want to be as the CEO and founder of Tatum Robotics.
Yeah. I mean, leadership is an interesting thing too, because very rarely do they teach you what that looks like.
Right. And it's so different person to person. I remember when we first started growing the team, how I approach leadership to how I would want to be led. And I realized that's actually not the same as how these other folks want to be led. And so understanding, what I can offer as a leader, where we need to, adjust to that we all work together as a team was, it's a great skill and something I'm always learning to. And I always thank my early team members for being with me on that journey of understanding how we can grow together.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And, we're coming up on a close to close the podcast down. But Tatum Robotics, I mean, you're a new company. It doesn't feel like that because robotics is like dog years. Every year is like 7, right? But, what is the overall vision? Where are you guys going to go?
Yeah, well, I think, and Jaimi will probably attest to this, but we see this growing and growing beyond just deafblind people in their homes, but this just making the world an accessible place for deafblind. Right now we're building a hand that does fingerspelling. We're going to start building a whole arm that does complex signing.
Fantastic.
I mentioned we have collaborations across the world with other sign languages because obviously deafblind can be very isolated and there's minimal resources here in the US. You can imagine that's exacerbated in other places of the world. And we have collaborations with schools, with hospitals, with, just libraries and museums to, again, just allow the deafblind to approach the world in the same way that hearing sighted people do. So hopefully this is just the beginning and we'll hopefully continue to see us going forward.
Yeah. And we're grabbing lunch after this. So, one thing I do want to talk to you about at lunch is, making this podcast accessible.
That would be wonderful.
Because we, actually Forrest of our team thought of that yesterday. He's like, we need to talk to Sam because we need people to know in the community about your product.
Yeah, that would be great. We actually introduced Jaimi one day when I think actually on a previous podcast that we had done. Somebody asked Jaimi, "Did you hear the podcast?" She's like, "What's a podcast?" So we actually put the podcast on the robot and she listened to the podcast. She's like, "Podcasts are so cool." So we can definitely think of many ways to make this accessible, not only for the deafblind, but for the broader range of your audience as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. So,
Wonderful.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Everyone, Samantha Johnson over at Tatum Robotics, the website, tatumrobotics.com.
I always forget to do the handles at the end.
I know, I know. Well, yeah, and Mandy Dwight, Dwight and Company, sales and marketing strategy for automation and robotics companies. And again, really passionate about talking to somebody like Sam that's really doing robotics for good.